Okay, we're here. June something. It is gonna be a wild episode. We're breaking all the rules, all the format, and we're trying something new this week. We're gonna do a draft, and Brett's gonna take it from here. Here we go, Brett.
All right. So as
Brett.
explained, we're doing 6 different albums. The concept is you're on a road trip. It's like between the years of 1999 and 2011. So you have a CD changer in your car, which some still do. But anyway, it's a 6 CD changer. So you can only bring 6 CDs with you on the road trip. I'm pretending you don't have any storage for any other CDs. So you get your 6 and that's it.
It's broken, so like you can't change them.
You can't change it.
Yeah.
It's like that How I Met Your Mother episode.
Where are we driving to on this road trip?
Somewhere over 6 hours. So we're going to see Matt in New Hampshire.
Okay.
We'll take it.
But the rules. Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
I just want you to know, just the format that you mentioned, where it's like 6 CDs. I've reshuffled this list today like 100 times, so I don't know what I'm drafting.
That's fair. I think we all have pretty wide lists because we don't know what's gonna fall to who and everything. So
I just have my Spotify saved albums open, and I'm just gonna try and hope
there
that
you go.
works.
You just mark off what's taken.
There's no years on anything. This is gonna be a disaster.
There's years in Spotify.
Not in like this like general album view. I guess I could just click them.
You could.
All right. So wait, did we say the parameters yet for the years?
The parameters are it's 1999 to 2011, and it's geared towards pop punk, metalcore, and emo. We said, right?
Oh, metalcore. So we can have Linkin Park.
Mostly pop punk emo, I guess. So
by the end, it's just going to be end country and like a little bit of doo wop if you can.
And Creed.
Yeah.
But so we were having this discussion before, but I guess EPs do count if there's an EP you want to throw in. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full length. But another grounder I want to throw out is if you're picking an album like Say Anything's in Defense of the Genre, which is a double album, that counts as 2. Because technically that's 2 CDs. Even though it is 1 album, it's 2 CDs in your car. So or if you're doing early November's 2006 album, that's half your list.
Who would draft that one?
I'm gonna take Uno Dos Tres.
The mother, the mechanic, the path.
There it is. Yep. I was blanking on the name for a second.
When did Uno Dos Tres come out? I'll just take all those, and that'll be my whole list.
I think that was 2012.
Oh man, I can't get Green Day's best albums. We have to pick an order.
I was going to say, how are we picking the draft order? We're doing it live.
Well, it's got to be snake draft, right?
Naturally.
Auction style. We each get $200.
Yeah, what do I win for this?
That would be pretty cool.
Do we just
You win the Rivers Cuomo Chia Pet. I
want all your podcast ad revenue for the next month.
Oh, that's easy. You already have
it. Pure organic, baby.
So MeUndies, let me tell you about this underwear.
I wish. Promo code general admission.
Yeah.
Please, someone pay us. Anyway. Order we joined. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I like that.
Sean snake drafts.
Double pigs.
So it's Nick, myself.
No, you joined before me.
Oh, I did.
I mean, I had to admit you, but I got the email that you were on before I walked into my basement.
So I think
it's Frank 1-1.
Oh damn! Actually, I think this one's easy. So Frank, Nick, Brett, Matt, Sean.
Boom.
Oh.
Yep. I think right, Nick.
Oh god.
And this is a full Monmouth cast. Right here?
It is a Monmouth Gen Ed.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, it's always a Monmouth Gen Ed, but
that's a good point. Yeah, winner gets my student loans
that are still frozen.
All right, cool. Let's do it, boys.
All right, and I'll keep track of these too.
Oh yeah.
All right.
The first overall pick of the draft.
All right. For me, I feel like this is I almost have to pick this one. So I'm gonna go Enema of the State by Blink-182. My reasoning is like, at least in when I was growing up, like this is like the album that started it all. In my town, for every like dude my age, like everybody was listening to this album. It was the first time that we were like air guitaring in bedroom. It's I don't know, like literally like the first time I heard Dumpweed, like just as like that intro hits, like I was hooked. And it, of course, like the singles, you have Adam's song, All the Small Things, like those are awesome songs, but literally end to end, I probably listened to this album just like every other person our age, like 100 times, like first week.
Yeah.
So I'm locking that in.
I think
That's a great one.
I think what's really cool about this album, because I think we all love this album, is it almost speaks to a different time in music when labels were really investing in a different style of music than they are today. Like you look back at where Blink was at that point, they were riding the success of Dude Ranch, and a lot of people knew who they were, but it took like a lot of insight from their label to be like, okay, like we need to take this band and we need to invest a lot of money and resources into them. So the guy who produced this album is this dude Jerry Finn, who unfortunately he passed away when he was 39, but like Jerry Finn was like the king of pop punk back in the day. Like he's worked with Green Day and Pennywise and Rancid, Weezer, Goo Goo Dolls, like all these gigantic bands. And then they took him and they paired him with this mixer, Tom Lordalge, who again is like this dude who has worked with like U2, Rolling Stones, like Pink, Avril, Hanson, like MCA, the record label that put out Enema, saw Blink and they're like, okay, we need to invest a ton of time and money into this band. And it clearly paid off because they paved the way for a legitimate like 20 years of pop punk. And I just think that insight and seeing this band and what they were capable of and the genre that it sparked is pretty amazing. Them along with Green Day really just started it off for everyone.
Yeah,
It's probably why we're having this podcast.
Honestly,
we do talk Blink for like 20 minutes an episode. They're not even like, they're barely an active band.
yeah, you're not wrong.
That's a great pick though,
like,
for sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, no,
this was like the consensus number one pick. Like if I went first, I definitely would have picked this album too. It's my favorite album of all time. And I think that's a really interesting point you brought up, Matt. Like before this album came out, Blink actually considered themselves one-hit wonders. Like if you listen to a lot of their live stuff from like 98, 97, when they sing Damn It, they're almost like passive aggressively talking about how that song is their one and only hit. So it's funny how that album came out and completely redefined them as a band and made them like the mainstream, like household name they are today. And I think that stands to reason as why that album is just so popular to this day. Like that album cover is iconic too. Not even just the songs on the album. Like you see that album cover, you immediately know who it is.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I like that.
We should get her on the pod.
Yeah.
He said she still does appearances, right, Nick?
Yeah, I think she rises to fame a little bit. Like she knows what she's done to millions of prepubescent boys around the world. Sorry, we're keeping it clean.
Yeah. No, it's just for the pod. Don't worry.
Of course.
But like it's crazy because like last episode in the group chat this week, we were talking about the new No Pressure album, which I finally got a chance to listen to because of you guys like hyping it up. So even to this day in 2022, there's bands that are so clearly influenced by Blink-182. And, Parker had a hugely successful band in the story so far. So he had a million influences he could probably pick from. And even 20 years later, like you're still hearing so much of like Blink just bleeding into the genre. And like the album itself, like, it pretty much like spanned like all the different types of like pop punk songs you hear with this type of band. Like you have like, I literally wrote down a note, like dumb idiot songs like just Terry Gary, which is just like them just like farting out a song. But then you have like borderline emo love songs, like Going Away to College is like still like a perfect song. Like it's a great song. Wendy Clear is like similar. And then, then they just sprinkled in hit after hit.
Anthem,
so
like they got into it a little bit. It's a great album for sure, worthy of number one.
Yeah.
Um,
And 15 million sold. So like
Damn.
it's just a consensus number one pick.
so for me, for pick number two, I as much as I love that album, I have two albums in mind for that are my undisputed number one for a drive, and obviously I can't pick both, so I'll pick one, and I'm gonna go the Black Parade. If I'm in a car driving, that is an album that it's like listening to like a musical. Like I'm acting out the songs. I'm like just pulling my hair. Like it is like a whole thing when that album comes on. And it will make an hour of that drive disappear in a second because it has its ups and downs. It has its screaming. It has its ballads. It gets heavy. It's, I love that album so much. Yeah. Black Parade, number two. Okay.
Yeah, it's an awesome album, and obviously like the big song Welcome to Black Parade, like it's
Huge.
it's like it's an anthem in itself. And like I play guitar like a very mediocre, but just like the licks like leading
Yeah.
into
The
the
solos
song,
over
like,
the vocals are just awesome.
yeah,
How it starts with like Dead and like just that kind of like goofy waltzy singing kind of thing, and it just man. Then you have songs like House of Wolves, Mama, like all these like weird styles that they incorporate throughout the album. Like it's just so like musically diverse while still just being like an epic like pop punk album.
I
Teenagers
will
is
say
on that
too
too,
that
right?
yeah,
Well-
good, Brett, sorry.
I was just gonna say Teenagers is on that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
teenagers, you could get sad with like Cancer and I Don't Love You. You have those, just like, oh man. Famous Last Words. Like I
Oh,
could just
Rap
listen to
Famous
that
Last
on
Words.
repeat for like an hour.
And I will
Such a
say
good
too
one.
that out of all the bands that we're going to talk about today, I feel like My Chemical Romance is one of the ones that's almost transcended our generation. Where I work in a middle school, and there's still plenty of kids that are wearing My Chemical Romance T-shirts and My Chemical Romance
Yeah.
sweatshirts, and you don't see a lot of that anymore. Like back when I was in middle school, everyone was into bands, and now it's they're more so into like songs that they hear on TikTok. But My Chem is still one of those bands that I see T-shirts still. So I mean that's pretty cool that they've been able to do that despite being dormant as a band for a really long time until recently.
It adds to the mystique.
And now they're back.
yeah.
Now they're
They're
back.
back.
I hope the
Back,
show
baby.
happens in October. Been holding
think it
these
will.
tickets for so long.
For 3 years.
That's crazy. Now you got a Midtown opener on one of them too, which is
Yeah,
pretty cool.
that's the one I'm going to, which is cool.
Sweet.
Thursday would have been nice, but like Midtown, like I have a better chance of seeing Thursday than seeing Midtown. So
That's
I
Agreed.
think it's a win. All right, Brett, number three.
All right. So Frank, thank you for making my decision a little easier because I didn't know what I wanted to do with 1-1. I had two here. So I'm going with Blink-182 self-titled as my number one choice. I think it's Blink at their pinnacle. I think they peaked with this album. I think it's some of their best material. It was them firing on a whole creatively. There we go. And there's some of their best songs on there. Feeling This, I Miss You. And it's just it gets really weird in parts too, but it works for them. And I feel like a lot of bands have kind of tried to like take this Blink too, but it never works as well as it did here. And ultimately, like this kind of led to the end of Blink a couple years later, well, temporarily, or the Blink as we know it, I should say. But even like this was my album in middle school. Like I couldn't get enough of this. This was me listening to it every day on the bus, going to school, and
In the
I just remember
Discman.
being crushed when they broke up after this came out 2 years. But I still like haven't stopped listening to this album ever since it came out.
So here's a question for you, Brett. Do you think this is an album they make if Boxcar Racer never happened?
No, I think they needed that to make this happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was in high school when this came out, and I remember doing a speaking project on it for a communications class, and going through and listening to all the stories that they put together about recording the different songs. And I do think creatively they were in a different space because Mark felt the pressure to keep up with like what Tom and Travis wanted to do with Boxcar Racer. So I think that it's interesting that they were able to come back from that because that was a tough thing that happened to their band. And I agree with you. That's one of their best albums. And to work through that adversity and put out that album despite what happened afterwards, I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. This was, in my lifetime, maybe the most anticipated album I can ever remember. I remember when Feeling This first came out, and it was called Action, and it was on the Madden soundtrack that summer, and just listening to it
Yes.
over and over and over again. And just being so pumped for that album, and it wasn't even coming out for months after that. I was counting down the days till, I remember it still to this day, it was November 18th, 2003. I had the album cover printed out and taped to one of my binders because I was that big of a nerd. And this album, I knew it was going to be a little bit different, and it took me a while to warm up to it. But once I did, I was really hooked. And it's really funny because I also did a presentation in one of my freshman year classes. I think it was a public speaking class or a journalism class or something like that. And I remember using the song Violence for part of it. And the whole album, just top to bottom, other than maybe the interludes, which is more of a Mark thing, I love it. And especially one of the rare things they did in this album, they don't really have a lot of guest vocals on Blink albums. But the track with Robert Smith and The Cure, to me, is
so good.
most underrated Blink songs there are. Yeah.
After they put out that album, they went on the Dollar Bill tour, which I was able to go to for $75 bills. So yeah, it was a tough ticket to get back then.
You remember the music video for Feeling This too? So I remember that being on MTV all the time.
Yeah.
Before this came out.
Yeah, and I think who shot that? I think it was a famous music video director, David LaChapelle or somebody like that, shot that. I know a lot of money and investment went into that music video. It was big when they released the single.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle.
Yeah,
Dave Chappelle
himself directed that.
It's so funny that you brought up Madden, because as I was putting this list together, I realized how many emo pop punk songs and bands I discovered through video games. Because I was Tony Hawk, Madden, every year.
We really could.
You definitely could. Madden, MLB The Show, the college edition, they had a ton of
MVP baseball.
The Academy
I
think that's where I heard them. They had a song on one of those.
It's crazy. It's so funny.
Yeah, video games. I had a few snowboarding video games that also introduced me to a ton of stuff.
What was it? SSX Tricky?
Yeah, but then I feel like there was another one that wasn't SSX that had some good stuff. There's this band Autopilot Off that had a couple really good songs. I don't know whatever happened to them, but just random bands.
I changed the drum head of their drummer snare drum at I think it was Skate and Surf one year. They didn't have a drum tech, and I was standing right there. I was like, I can do that for you.
That's
they all
awesome.
signed it up
so
for
cool.
free. It was kind of cool. Yeah. All right. I guess I'm up. So honestly, I'm at a little bit of a loss here because I didn't think I was going to get this album drafting with who I'm drafting with today. So I got to go for my first pick, I got to go with Rise or Die Trying from 4 Years Strong, which is such a pivotal album for me on so many levels, musically and just personally as well, because you look at, Nick, we just met, but the three other guys I'm doing this podcast with, this album was a big reason why we all became friends and we, started hanging out and getting to know each other. And oh man, it just hits on so many levels. I think it came out in 2007. So it was my, either my first or second year of college, and going in, I had so many musical tastes, and to find a band that so perfectly merged all those tastes together was incredible. It was just an experience for me that I didn't really understand was possible, but when it happened for me, I was like, oh man, this is the album for me. And I think just growing up listening to a lot of hardcore bands and listening to a ton of pop punk bands, their ability to take nuances from both genres and mix them together, and then just to throw some gang vocals and keyword parts into it, and I don't know, every song from front to back is a banger in my opinion. From the moment you hear the bells ring in The Takeover to the last rise or die chant at the end of Maniac, it's such a good album for me. And I think with 4 Years Strong, I don't want to say that it's their best album, because I honestly think Enemy of the World is probably their best album. But in terms of what it did for me to open myself up to that genre of like mixed genres, if that makes sense. I know that was kind of a vague description, but and then on a musical level and then from a personal level as well, like this album means everything to me. We legitimately like closed my wedding with a 4 Year Strong song, and we had everyone out there like jamming out, like throwing out the gang vocals. So this album was it for me. Like this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and it really will always be my favorite album. And it also helps that I grew up just north of the border of Massachusetts, and they're a Massachusetts band, Worcester, Mass. And it's just a lot of hometown pride and a lot of good memories with friends. So
get all the holiday shows
for me. Oh, the holiday shows have become like a tradition for my wife and I. My mom babysits the kids, and we head down to, like we said, Worcester to the Palladium, and they'll always be one of my favorite bands, and this one definitely means a lot for me.
It's funny you mentioned how like you guys like bonded over it, because my freshman year of college, me and like friends that are now lifelong friends, we would get together in our dorm. We would like rip Super Smash Brothers and just play 4 Year Strong for like hours on end. It was just
I feel like they're
time.
the ultimate. Yeah, they're like the ultimate buddy band. Like you just want to hang out and scream some gang vocals together.
I have a question for the group.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Frank.
No, you go ahead.
Random. No, yours is probably more relevant.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So like everything Matt said, like I pretty much was gonna say the exact same thing. Like there was this point at Monmouth where like the group knew each other, and like Brett came in, when he got, because he's a little bit younger than the group, but like I think I walked into Matt's dorm. He was an RA in the building, and he had a big 4 Year Strong flag on his wall. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was the only person in this band. And then we just like started like absolutely like bonding over that. And to the band itself, like your point about it just being like a bro down band, I feel like it's because at least with this album and then Enemy of the World, they just understood what their mission was. I'm going to put like a song with gang vocals with an awesome breakdown. It's poppy, it's sing along words. Like if you look at their lyrics, they're just like slapping like cliche lyric after cliche lyric, but you're just like, I don't give a crap.
It works though.
Yeah. And then the shows are insane. Like it's just a group of like they reach that point where for me like pop punk bands are at its best, where they're big enough that they could headline, but they're not big enough where they pull in like fringe fans at like 2 or 3 songs. So when you go to a show, it's just people that love that band, especially now, like 5-10 years after their heyday. So I could probably go on and on about this album, but man, I think you put it perfectly.
That actually leads into what I was going to ask. Like, do you think that's why they haven't, like, this is very random, but that's why they haven't reached the level of like A Day to Remember, even though like they kind of both like blend those two sounds together, but like 4 Year Strong's like not as big as Day to Remember? Like, I don't understand like why they've never gotten to that level is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that question is there was a point where A Day to Remember and 4 Year Strong were on tour at Newfound Glory, and 4 Year Strong had a better billing than A Day to Remember. And it started yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what
and
led
it
to
started this giant rivalry between the two of them. And you look back at it, and as much as I love 4 Year Strong, like A Day to Remember, unfortunately for them, had a point. And it's a good question, like why didn't they make that jump? And I think maybe 4 Year Strong is just a little bit too nuanced to ever really reach that same level as A Day to Remember was. Like A Day to Remember's music is, their singles at least are much more straightforward than any of 4 Year Strong singles. And I think that straightforwardness of a song like All I Want, for example, probably propelled them to a different level than 4 Year Strong was capable of reaching.
A Day to Remember has like the chick songs too. Not that like chicks don't get down with the heavy stuff, but like they have those really soft like love songs that I think pull a lot more people in, and then those people might stick around because of it. And I don't listen to as much 4 Year Strong as you guys, but I don't think they have as many like ballad type songs. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think
that's
musically
my
they're
theory.
almost too complex for the mainstream. Like their licks and everything, and they're so fast paced. Like you hit the nail on the head, Matt. Like A Day to Remember singles just stand out more as being more radio friendly to me, and maybe that is why they had more appeal, and they really like kind of capitalize on the I don't know, it was almost like safe screamo, A Day to Remember in a way. It was like one of those like fringe like gateway screamo bands, I think, for a lot of people. And I know it's technically post-hardcore, but they're kind of in that weird middle ground. And I think they kind of bridged a couple of different like subgenres there, so I think that also helped maybe a little bit. But yeah, for whatever reason, For Your Strong just never had the same mainstream appeal that They Don't Remember did. And I think part of the reason, and it's tricky because they almost tried to go more mainstream with, oh God, I'm forgetting the name of the album that came out in 2011, the one that bombed.
In some way,
shape, or form.
Yeah. And I think that was their attempt to go more mainstream, but they almost, it seemed like more of a passion project for them than it was actually what was mainstream at that point, maybe. And that really set them back. Like they never really fully recovered from that album. And
they tried to be the Deftones.
Yeah, it's almost like they've had a chip on their shoulders since, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up, and I feel like we could talk about it in some way, shape, or form because I don't know it's going to be anybody's list, and maybe if it is, I apologize.
I don't
but
think so.
I distinctly remember that after Enemy of the World, they went on tour with, I believe, Rise Against and Foo Fighter. I forget who they were on the tour with, but I remember a tweet coming out or something before that, like they were heavily influencing the new album on like the bands they were touring with. And Nick, Brett, you guys were absolutely talking about Rise Against last podcast, and it's nothing against the band Rise Against, but it was just like clearly For Your Strong was trying to, Rise Against is in this genre, and then they pushed into the mainstream and they just went away from what they were good at. Like they stopped doing double bass, they fired Josh, and it just became like watered down. And then they tried to save it with the next album, which was a great album, but it was almost like people were so hyped after Enemy of the World, and then it's just hard to recover. And you mentioned the ballad piece. They did the acoustic follow-up of Enemy of the World, and it was great. And they showed that they can break it down, slow it down, and like between the Wasting Time cover and some of the other covers, like they showed like we can play slow songs that are prettier, but they just never made like the main album. So it's like you had to be a super fan to then look at the B-sides, and it's just a tough sell. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. All right, Sean, you wanna
Without further ado.
Yeah, Sean's up.
Yeah, sure.
You got two.
You do have two.
Oh, you're right, I do. So I just called an audible and changed my pick right before this. I completely forgot I have two picks in a row. So I had two albums I was going back and forth between to this point, and then all of a sudden I realized, like, you know what? I have to grab this one now, because if I don't know if it's going to come back around to me. So we've already got Enema of the State and Self-Titled off the board. I got to take Off Your Pants and Jacket off the board before I lose it. I just got to pick this album. Like, even though there's other bands I want to get in here, it's just too important of an album in my life. Like, I remember before I had any kind of disposable income as a kid and was probably spending most of my money on wrestling action figures. I remember this album was coming out. I was obsessed with The Rock Show and saying to my parents, like, if you buy me this album, I'll learn to play every album on I'll learn to play every album on every song in Enema of the State, so that you buy me this album. And they bought it for me anyway, which is cool. But it was just that important to me to get my hands on this album as soon as I could. I still vividly remember going to pick it up with my dad that day. I got the version, if you remember, they had like the 3 different versions you could get with the 2 hidden bonus tracks. I got the red one with the plane on it and didn't even discover the bonus tracks until like months later, which is cool that was even a thing back then. It's a lot like Enema of the State, very similar musically. I think maybe slightly more mature, if anything. But every song in this album is just a banger. It's something you could listen to all the way through. Like, even like some of the deeper cuts, like Roller Coaster, I get really amped up for. And Every Time I Look for You, it's just one of those really solid albums front to back, and definitely a big one in my life.
Yeah.
Did you get the album reference when you were around that age, or did it take you a couple of years?
Honestly, I didn't even realize what it meant until somewhat recently.
Yeah. That was like 22, I think.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, jacket. I get it.
Yeah. I had the edited version. My aunt bought me the album for Christmas, and my mom took one look at it. Some of the track titles, "Shut the fuck up," "Happy Holidays, you bastard," and she's like, "Nah, we're bringing this back." And then I had the edited version that had is it "What Went Wrong" as the bonus track? I don't know if that's the
Yeah,
title. Yeah.
that was the yellow version.
Yeah, it was cool though because it wasn't like a shiny CD cover. It was more like matte, like cardboard feeling.
Oh yeah, they had the bifold CD case for those, right? Yeah, that's cool. I remember that. Oh man, this album, I agree with Sean, is just like so like I had known about Blink before, but this was like their first full length like original album that they put out when I had already known about them as a band. Like by the time I had discovered Blink, Enema had already come out, so this was for me like, okay, Blink has a new album coming out. And to Sean's point about the 3 different versions, like I had my mom driving me around to different record stores so I could get all 3 versions. Like I had to have all the bonus tracks. But doing some digging on this album, I didn't realize back then like how stressful of an album this was for them to write. Like they talk about how this album between Mark and Tom really became a competition and how it wasn't a super healthy relationship while they were writing it. Sean, I love that you said that you loved Rock Show, because Rock Show is one of my favorite Blink songs of all time, but that's a song that their manager essentially made them write because they wanted a summer hit for the album. I don't know. I think it's a great song. And I guess the other tidbit that I found really interesting for this is apparently Tom was heavily influenced by Alkaline Trio while writing this album, which is really funny considering his replacement eventually. But and then the last thing I thought was really interesting was Travis was really upset with Tom and Mark because they had the 3 symbols, right? The pants, the jacket, and the plane. And Travis is like, please guys, don't give me the plane. I don't want the plane. Like I hate flying. Like I really don't want the plane. And then like later on, like he was in that tragic it's you look back at it now, you laugh at the scenario with the 2 of them, but then or the 3 of them, and then he was in that tragic plane accident. So some weird like foreshadowing there with him ending up with that plane symbol. But yeah, overall, just I mean, I agree, Sean. Some of the deep cuts on that album are just phenomenal.
Let me ask you guys this question, because we were talking about this a little the other day, and I feel like this era, it was interesting because it was so hard for bands to have a strong follow-up album. They'd reach like mainstream success and they couldn't follow up. I think it's safe to say Take Off Your Pants and Jacket was the best follow-up album in this era, like to a mainstream hit or a mainstream album like Enema of the State.
Yeah, you know what, Frank, I think that's a good point. Like you think about some of the other albums that have come out, and I don't want to take anything away from an album like Catalyst that followed up Sticks and Stones, but it definitely didn't reach the level that Sticks and Stones did in my mind. I think for a lot of these bands, like there's definitely exceptions, but this is the first pop punk band after Green Day maybe that had a follow-up as big as the previous album that I can remember, at least.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it because some albums haven't been brought up yet.
That's why I'm not saying anything.
There's one that comes to mind. Sean, let's go to your next pick since we've done a lot of Blink talk so far. Unless you just have some other. Is the Mark, Tom, and Travis show in there? Just round it out.
We'll just do a Blink
neighborhoods
draft.
That would be a fun one. I don't know what year that came out. I'm sure it was after 99.
I've got a couple here I want to pick. It's tough because there's a couple that I really want on my list, but I'm not sure if they'll snake back around to me. You know what? I'm going to go with the more popular one here. I think there's a chance this one comes back around. I'm going to go with one that for me was like the first underground band that really made it mainstream. I was in 8th grade when this album, or 7th grade when this album came out, and they really blew up around that 7th, 8th grade time frame. And like even the kids that weren't like emo, like pop punk kids knew about this band all of a sudden. So I'm just going to have to go with Tell All Your Friends by Taking Back Sunday. Like that was like the first mainstream emo album that I can remember. And like every track on it's so solid. Like to this day, like, I don't know, like I feel like I'm transported back to 8th grade when I listen to it. yeah, it's just one of my all-time favorite albums in this genre.
It's amazing. And if someone's on this road trip with you, you guys could do the call and response vocals. It'll be a lot of fun.
The double bonus.
I try to do it myself sometimes. It gets very confusing.
I was a bigger fan of the other Long Island call and response band.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
We will at
Get
some
there.
point.
Yeah, tell all your friends though. I mean, it's iconic. It did it start, like, as far as I'm concerned, it like invented call and response vocals, because I don't know too many. Like Blink kind of did it, but like they didn't lean into it as hard.
He took it to another level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point though that you bring up, because I agree. Blink was more so like a Tom song and a Mark song, where this was that call and response. And I bet this almost influenced some bands like 4 Year Strong, right? Who just go back and forth on a lot of their vocals. So yeah, I like that point.
Yeah, Blink had like Pathetic. That's like the one that always comes to mind with that. Look at
Yeah,
us
that's
talking
a
about
jam.
Blink again.
That's a jam.
This is just a Blink podcast now, right?
Blinkcast. Change the name. I think you guys, what was the name that you guys gave the pod last week? It was like cold and
The Cold Miserable
Cold and
podcast.
miserable.
There's just a new name every week.
All right, Matt, you're up.
All right, let's do it. I think I got to be the first person here as the resident Newfound Glory super fan to go with the Newfound Glory album. So I know Sticks and Stones kind of sparked this debate here, but I actually have to go with Newfound Glory's self-titled album. This was, talking about albums that mean a lot to me. This is another one that means a lot to me because I feel like this was the first band I almost discovered on my own. So my first introduction to Newfound Glory was I was at this day camp up in New Hampshire, and this kid showed me a couple. He's like, "Oh, you like Blink? Like, check out these 2 songs." And he showed me MXPX's punk rock show, and then he showed me Newfound Glory's cover of "Glory of Love," and I was like, "Whoa, this is amazing! Like, I need more of this Glory of Love, like Newfound Glory band. What's going on here?" And that's where I really discovered this self-titled album from Newfound Glory. So this was again. Just a super pivotal album for me when it came to discovering the genre, and it was another album that man, where am I going with this? Sorry, lost my train of thought here. I took way too many notes on this album, so I'm like, what do I want to hit on first? Let's talk about the producer. So I talked about Jerry Finn and Blink-182 before. So Jerry Finn actually started off as the producer for this album, but the band really didn't love the way that he produced Hit or Miss. So they decided to go with another guy, this guy Neil Averon, who again is another like a gigantic producer in like the pop punk genre. So this was Newfound Glory's first major label release. They were previously on Drive-Thru Records, and for those of you guys who don't know, Drive-Thru Records had this insane deal with MCA Records. Drive-Thru was going broke, and they wanted to keep their label afloat, so they signed this deal with MCA that essentially provided MCA the opportunity to upstream any band off of Drive-Thru Records that they wanted and to take them over as their own band. So this worked out really well for some bands like Newfound Glory, but it absolutely destroyed other bands like The Starting Line and Census Fail had a really tough time with this deal. So they got upstream to MCA, and I think this band has such a heavy pace to it. And I talked a little bit about 4 Year Strong mixing genres before. And I think the reason 4 Year Strong was able to do that is because there were bands like Newfound Glory doing it for a really long time, but they were kind of hiding under that like pop punk genre. Going back now and knowing what I do about music, like knowing more about music, I'm able to recognize that there are a ton of like hardcore guitar riffs in this. There's really fast paced drumming. And it's just, for me, an album that from front to back is super exciting for me. And it's music that I truly love. And I never, ever, ever get sick of this album. I've had the opportunity to see them play it front to back probably 4 or 5 times now. And I almost get more excited for those shows than the hits shows, because I get to hear all these songs that, like Sucker or Boy Crazy, All About Her, these songs that I really, really fell in love with back in middle school and that I still really love today. So yeah, I have to go with Newfound Glory's self-titled album. It was also a number 14 on Rolling Stone's top 50 greatest pop punk albums of all time, which I thought was pretty cool that they were up that high, because this Newfound Glory, along with bands like Sum 41 and Good Charlotte, were probably the first wave of bands that really benefited from Blink and Green Day's success. Yeah, Newfound Glory, they're I don't think I'll ever stop going to see Newfound Glory shows.
Dude, Chad loves his heavy chords.
Yeah, he was the lead singer of a hardcore band back in the day, so they had so much hardcore influence, and didn't really know what hardcore was back in 7th and 8th grade, so I had that soft introduction before I really got into some of those heavier bands.
That's a good pick.
Him live doing Tip of the Iceberg is like probably like my favorite like hardcore Chad with Newfound Glory.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice.
All right, Brett.
All right.
You're up.
So
Don't do it.
I have two options here.
I'm so scared.
All right, I'm going with it. So this is a really important album to me, and I feel like if I don't take it now, it's not going to be there when it comes back around. So I'm going with A Day to Remember, Homesick. So
No.
So kind of like Rise or Die Trying, I feel like Homesick is a really important album for like how we all became friends too. And this one came out my freshman year or my senior year of high school going into freshman year of college. And obviously like that's like a transition time in your life where it's like not the easiest. And this album was like the soundtrack that got me through all that and kind of transitioned me from, you know, high school friends to college friends and feeling like I belonged again. And whenever I had my doubts or wasn't feeling great, like this album was there to pick me back up. Because it's filled with highs and lows. Like you have the downfall of us all at the beginning. You have like the heavy songs, like Mr. Highway was my good pissed off song. You had the ballad at the end, If It Means a Lot to You. And this one is just one that's great all the way through. And it's led to many nights of sing-alongs. And I think it's still their best album. I know a lot of people like What Separates Me From You, but I still think this is their peak.
Brett, is it fair to say that this album made you the man you are today?
I think that's fair to say. Used to headbang on your living room table to songs.
No, I vividly remember playing this a lot in our apartment, especially senior year. And it's funny how we talked about this band, A Day to Remember, like transcending its genre and really having appeal to other people in the mainstream and like people who listen to different genres. Like our roommate, Sean Mahoney, shout out to Sean.
Mahone.
Listened almost exclusively to rap at that point, and he loved A Day to Remember. Like he just started picking up on all the music that we started playing, and like it really started with A Day to Remember. I vividly remember sitting there, I think it was just Frank, and maybe it was just the three of us, and he comes in, he's like, "Oh, what do you listen to? Mr. Henry Where's the Neighborhood?" One of my favorite moments. But yeah, I remember listening to this album all the time senior year and everyone being into it. It was just a great group album to listen to.
Dude, in Mr. Highway, it's a perfect song. Like that build-up intro where you're literally, it's just like something consumes you. Like it's that, and then it goes into like just like a classic hardcore song, like an absolutely vicious breakdown. And then the outro, which is just like, I mean, something A Day to Remember always does well is great lead-ins to breakdowns. Like whether it's like the throat clear, like the everybody's out to get, like it, and then that like Mr. Highway ends with that like awesome outro that's like kind of slowed down, and it's just like a huge step change. Like
let you catch your breath.
Like to our point about them versus 4 Year Strong before, like that's a perfect example. Like they remember just sometimes they I hate to say it, but they just took more interesting takes on song structure.
Yeah, they surprised you with some stuff.
I was listening to Silverstein's podcast, and they had Mike Krenek on from Devil Wears Prada talking about the song that he recently did with them. And they made a joke about how they wanted him to come back to re-record a throat clear. And I had no idea that he was the one who did the throat clear and the screaming part in that song.
I didn't know.
So that was no, me either. That was new to me. I just like literally 2 days ago I heard that. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then Brett, I think it's very fitting that you picked this album after I picked a Newfound Glory album because Chad actually produced this album.
He did.
So
That's right.
yeah. So Chad from Newfound Glory produced this and What Separates Me from You. And I think there's a ton of Newfound Glory influence out on this album. And it's definitely for the best because I think we all agree that the more poppy aspects of this album is probably what propelled them as a band.
Not the Poppy that came out last year.
Yeah, no, we don't. I don't think we talk about those New A Day to Remember albums, do we?
The Marshmallow
What
song was
albums?
pretty
You're
sick.
not welcome.
The Marshmallow song is
Yeah,
awesome. I
but
agree.
that's a
I agree
Marshmallow
with you,
song.
but-
That's true.
Featuring a
That's,
day to remember.
that's true.
Semantics.
No, but that's a great point. Yeah. Damn.
Am I up?
Back to you. Yep.
All right. I want to have a well-rounded 6, but I didn't think this would make it back to me, and I have to take it. American Idiot. I just need it. I need it for a long car ride. Again, like I love these concept albums that came out in the early 2000s, and Black Parade and American Idiot are two of my favorites that do that. I love albums that tell a story, that have their ups and downs. Jesus of Suburbia is like maybe one of the best songs Green Day's ever written. Like that song is awesome. Then you have Homecoming at the end. You had like it's just a perfect album in my mind. They were my first concert ever, so like that tour especially. So it holds a special place in my heart, and I need it on my list.
It's an awesome album. Like Jesus of Suburbia, mind you, it's like what 15 minutes long of like
It's up there. Might be
like 5 like separate songs, and it all makes sense together. Like it all flows. It's a cool story. Yeah, I definitely my angsty like stage. I had that blasting all the time.
I remember like my first listens, like when he would reference, I think it was maybe in Homecoming, he would reference like the Jesus of Suburbia has died or something. And I was like, whoa, he's talking about another song on the album. This is crazy.
Like,
I obviously haven't heard like Dark Side of the Moon by this point in my life, but it totally blew my mind. It's just such like a good storytelling album. Yeah, American Idiot.
Also, Nick, I like how you said that Black Parade and American Idiot go 1-2, and you ended up with both of them.
Yeah, those are my 1-2. So I'm pretty happy right now. But now there's other ones that I want that I'm scared.
Yeah, and I mean, like on this album, like it also had just huge mainstream success too. Like obviously American Idiot, which was another. I think that was a Madden song as well.
It was, yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, like Madden just knew how to pick them, and nowadays they don't have any rock on. But
you mentioned it earlier with like bands that have done it twice. Like Dookie was bigger than it had any business being, and then they came back again like 10 years later and did it all over again. Like that is unheard of. It's just
and Good Riddance, like arguably their biggest hit was almost like overshadowed by this album. Like this, even though Good Riddance was such a huge song, I feel like that was kind of their one big like. Dookie was mainstream too, so it's hard to say, but you know everybody knew Good Riddance. That was like a graduation song. It was a wedding song.
It's just so ironic.
This truly like propelled them into the mainstream, and it seemed like at that point they'd almost been overtaken by Blink's popularity, and this really like put them back on the map. Like they did Warning in 2000, and like I liked that album and those songs, but they kind of like. I think they released their greatest hits album like 2001. It almost seemed like
international super hits.
Passed them by.
Yeah.
And then
which was packed with
it was loaded.
Yeah.
And then they had like 20 albums after.
Yeah, it's like they had like a second phase to their career, and this really like kickstarted that. This was almost like the start of their mainstream albums. Like I always thought, it sounds shitty, but as a kid at the time, I really thought Green Day kind of sold out when they released this album. Not to be contrarian, but this really was the start of them going in that more mainstream direction with all the albums that they came out with. They got more political. It really does almost feel like a second career that they had following this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a question for you guys. Have you guys followed that second career from Green Day? Because while I think this was a gigantic success for them and it really changed them from a punk band to a mainstream rock band, I don't know if I could name another Green Day album after this.
Yeah,
21 Guns, is that the name of the album? Or is that just the song off it?
None quite hit the same. I enjoyed Revolution Radio, but like not
That was
nearly
a good
to the
one.
extent Yeah, no, I think you're right, but they still put on a great live show, which I think helps keep the legacy going. I'll still
Yeah,
see them
agreed.
live despite not being super into like that album with like the throwing up unicorn or whatever was not
Not
great.
good at all. Yeah.
That
But
was a
you know, if
disappointment.
Green Day's reached that point where it's like they could put out garbage after garbage. They've already done their like if Blink, I hate to keep going with Blink, but like those two bands are so like connected.
Yeah.
They could put out garbage songs the rest of their careers and it doesn't matter. They've already like
Yeah.
changed their genre more than any two other bands.
Yeah, it's like a Weezer type band where when they've been that famous for that long and have that many hits in their catalog, it doesn't matter what they do, they're always going to be like a major headlining act.
Yep.
And it's funny, like I really didn't think about that, Matt, but you know, I guess there were other people who kind of thought like me at that point, and I feel like maybe they lost some fans within this niche that we're talking about now and got more mainstream, so they didn't need us as much. But I feel like they did kind of. It wasn't as cool to like Green Day around like 2004, 2005. It almost became cooler to like, oh, what new bands are coming out, and they kind of lost some clout within like the emo pop punk scene after they released American Idiot.
Yeah.
You can tell that you probably have like 2 years on me because that's all it took for someone to be like Green Day was a punk band and American Idiot was not punk. Whereas American Idiot to me was pretty much like my first big exposure to Green Day. Like I'd kind of heard Welcome to Paradise. And so like I didn't have that sort of those expectations at all. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting like what a small window it takes to just have a totally different perspective on a band.
Yeah, seriously, we're only talking like a year or two of an age gap. But for me, like I got into them, like I knew them before I got the album, but I remember summer of 2002 getting international super hits and like listening to that on repeat that whole summer and being really into it. And then kind of being like, oh, they're getting political with American Idiot. And that's kind of where I started to like fall off with them a little bit. So it is interesting how, you know, just being exposed by to their earlier stuff before American Idiot came out may have changed my view of that album.
Yeah.
They also came on that album, I think was the one where they became a 4-piece, not in credit, but they started layering guitar and they had a touring guitarist. I forget his name.
He's still
But it
in the
was
band,
on-
though, I think, right?
Is he?
Yeah.
I forgot
So
his
is
name
Yeah, he
too.
would kind of take the solos and stuff. I
Yeah.
remember.
Because it's almost like they saw pop punk used to be 3-piece. This shifted to 4-piece, lead and rhythm. Let's do it. Like that to me is like cool. And every genre and every era has those type of bands. So all right.
Take it away, Frank.
Brett took Homesick, which is going to be mine. So screw you, Brett. I have like 3 or 4 I could put. I think I'm gonna go with Take This to Your Grave. Because when I'm thinking this era, and at least where I grew up, it was like Tell All Your Friends, Take This to Your Grave, and then some albums from a Long Island band that nobody's mentioned yet, so we won't get into them yet. But I was actually late to the party, so I went down the new metal phase where everybody in my age group went emo, and I kind of came back at some point. And this album's awesome, not just because of like the songs that everybody loves, like Grand Theft Autumn, but as I was learning guitar, this was like a perfect album to learn because it's easy to play, but everything's so catchy. It's so fun to play. And just from doing that, like I repeat songs over and over and I never get bored of them, which a lot of times when I'm like learning songs on guitar, I'm like, okay, now I don't want to hear this song like ever again. I could put this album on driving, like me and my wife, and never get bored and never skip a song, which is always like, for me, I'm a playlist guy. So for me to listen to an album end to end is like impossible. So I don't love Fall Out Boy as a band. I think
There's
it's
two different Fall Out Boys at this point.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Yeah, because I don't love bands that refuse to play their older stuff. I get it. I get their point of view, but Fall Out Boy, I got a sour taste in my mouth when Patrick Stump wrote this like letter to his fans on why they don't play Take This to the Grave live, and it was just this corny, just sappy bullshit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, Nobody wants to hear "Light It Up." Like, just play. Take this to your grave and sugar, we're going down, and then move on.
It's not fair for them to put those albums down because, like you said, they're really interesting albums. Like you mentioned the guitar, and that stands out to me especially because these aren't just like power chord albums. Like the guitars are doing interesting stuff. It's
Yeah.
not just easy to pick up and jam out to. So like, I don't know. They should be proud of those albums. I don't know why they wouldn't play them. That's news to me.
I honestly didn't even know that was a thing. That's insane to me that they won't play some of the songs from this album. Like, I get not wanting to play some of the stuff before this, even though Grand Theft Auto is my favorite song by them. But it's just wild that they won't even play some of the songs that really made them famous, if we're being honest. Like, people knew who they were within our genre, but this, again, is the album that made them mainstream. And it's just crazy that instead of that, they're just out there like, oh, you want to hear Take This to Your Grave? Well, here's this tasty lick featuring Missy Elliott.
Like, how do they do it? They go on a tour with Green Day and Weezer, and they don't want to play their songs that like lean towards pop punk. Like, that's
Makes no sense.
wild. If I can see
Yeah.
you're touring your new album and it's all like whatever your new sound is, and you want to stick to that, fine. But like, if you're doing a tour with Weezer and Green Day, play. You know what the fans there want. Like, are you kidding me? That's just that's wild.
Yeah, I think geez, from the moment that album starts with that like dial tone noise at the beginning, like, you know you're in for it, and you hear that without hearing any notes of the song. You're like, oh, here we go, like we're about to jam. And Shawnee, I know you were talking a little bit about their success, and I just find it interesting that I think the label knew they had something special with this band because they were signed to Island Records, but they put this album out on Fueled by Ramen, which is like an imprint of Island Records, as a marketing strategy. So they're like, we know that this is going to be a huge band, but let's put them out on a smaller, like, quote unquote independent label to try to gain some clout or some reputation for them within the community. And then they were able to ride that for a few albums before they did do that gigantic genre switch.
That's really cool, Matt. I had no idea. It's almost like they know they're going to lose clout if they put them under a major label. So they purposely kept them with it, because that eventually happens to every band. So it probably kept them popular within the genre for a little bit longer than they would have been otherwise.
Matt, you have really awesome tidbits tonight.
Yeah.
I feel so unprepared. I'm like,
I took a lot of notes. I took a lot of notes. I'll tell you when I was taking the notes, but I have to say it off record because I wasn't supposed to be taking notes during this period of time.
like
Your
Matt's
secret's safe with us.
Matt's in these tidbits. I'm sitting here like, I like song because it goes raw. It's just like,
Guitar's good.
raw, loud gang vocals. I like it. All right, my second pick. This might be a reach, but this band has become probably one of my top 2 bands, and I'm struggling to choose which album, so I'm just going to choose the one that I think makes most sense. Bayside, The Walking Wounded. So I am I've become a huge fan of Bayside over the last 10 years. Before that, I really just knew Devotion and Desire from their self-titled.
Yeah.
But yeah, and from MVP Baseball 2005 is where I saw that song. But The Walking Wounded, and I was so happy to go to the 20-year anniversary tour. Bayside to me is the tightest band of this era, just in the sense of like musically, the songs they put out, the talent of each individual band member. Like, I feel it is tough to find a band that matches all those components. Like, Anthony Ranieri to me has to be like top 2 or 3 singers, like from singing ability from this era. And then Jack the guitarist just absolutely shreds. I don't know if you've ever seen them live.
They shred way more
band.
live.
Oh my God, dude. Best live band, probably, well, I realize I'm biased, but one of the best live bands I've seen. And he does not miss a note. He plays very difficult riffs. And it's like he's played them obviously thousands of times in his career.
Heath from Midtown always says that Jack is like the best guitarist in the scene. Like, he's a huge fan of his. You're right, he's insanely talented.
Yeah, and he's like a smaller dude, and like his hands aren't that big, and you watch him play and it's crazy. And just from the songs on this album, like Duality was a great single. Carry On, like especially live when it gets to that point at the end where they, pass the bridge and it's the like carry on, like they get the crowd to do it, and it's one of those where like every like hair on your like my arm just like stands up. And then Landing Feet First, to our point about bands that can break it down and have like kind of a ballad, that's probably it's definitely like a top 5 favorite song all time. It's just like such a different song that they put out. It's actually like pretty romantic in a way. And, just they put on a clinic, I feel like, every time they write an album.
That Vinny from the Movie Life feature is one of my favorite like guest vocal appearances ever. It's just so good.
Oh, such a good album.
Yeah, I've seen them with Taking Back Sunday a bunch. Like I never listened to a ton of Bayside, but I saw them live a bunch of times. And I always felt like they shredded way more live than they did on the albums. And I always left thinking just like, damn, that guitarist knows what's up. They got chops. I should dig into them more. I'm gonna dig into any albums we talk about that I haven't. This is one of them. Yeah.
Very interesting songs. Like they're the kind of band they'll never get old, because every song is like a piece that you listen to it 5 times and you'll find something else about the song that you like. All right.
So all right, I'm gonna go with Siren Song, Rise Against. They're by far like my favorite band. I think Tim is one of the great lyricists of our time. Their bass player, Joe Principe, is like a master. Like the bass lines he comes up with and the runs he goes on in their songs just never get old to me. And they honestly, I could close my eyes and pick pretty much any album they put out in this time, but I think Siren Song is just a little more raw than the others, and I like that. Like Life Less Frightening, First Drop, like it's got like that heavy guitar. Tim's voice is like nice and scratchy on it. It starts off State of the Union, like you just know what you're in for right away. It's one of my favorites.
This one pretty much put them on the mainstream, I'd say, right?
Yeah, I remember that in the Dan Ozzie book, how Tim was talking about how Swing Life Away, like that was just a song he like wrote on his own, and they convinced him to put it on the album, and then it like became super popular. It would be on at like Target and stuff, and like these like soccer moms are listening to it. And he was saying how he loves the idea that like there's people out there who heard Swing Life Away and they're like, oh, this is nice, let me get this album. And then they put it on and State of the Union just kicks it off with him like screaming about like the state of our country and like war. It's just like, it's not indicative of what the album is at all, and it's just great. It's such a good album. Oh, don't click that. Yeah, it's easy pick for me.
Yeah, I always, every time I heard a Rise Against song, I always liked that. It's just like Bayside too. Like I just never dug into their catalog, so I definitely have to take a look.
Oh man, yeah, you're in for a treat. I mean, the album they just put out last year, Nowhere Generation, like to me is just as good as anything they've done. For a band to still be putting out good, interesting albums after like 20 years is just a sign of like their talent. Yeah. They're my number one, like by far. I love those guys.
Yeah, they know who they are and they stick to it, which is like their strength.
Yeah. But his lyrics are so good that like you want to listen to new songs, you want to keep going back to old songs, and the instrumentals are there too. But like I'm a sucker for lyrics and ones that make you think and good metaphors. Like you guys know what it takes. But yeah, he's a master. All right, Brett, take it away.
I'm torn between 2 again, so I think
Don't
I just gotta
take another good one. Pick a garbage album.
All right, so I'm gonna go with 311. No, I'm kidding.
I said a garbage album, Brett. That was all of our next pick. Amber is the color of your energy, damn it.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So this one pretty much introduced me to Screamo. So I feel like I have to take it because without finding this one, I don't know, I get to where I currently am musically. So I'm going with Finch, What It Is to Burn.
Oh,
So-
that was such a good pick. That's such a good pick. Oh, I love this. Go.
So when this one came out, I've never heard anything like this before. Like I was at my cousin's house or like in his backyard. He put this on, and I've never heard any like screaming like this before or like a heaviness. Even though like Linkin Park was out by then, but like this took like screaming to like a whole nother level. Like New Beginnings, like again, you have that slow build, and that song just kicks ass and sets the tone for that entire album. And I don't think there's a single like bad song on the album. Like even like their ballads are good. Like I don't know if Letters to You is necessarily a ballad, but it's a jam.
In the scope of this album, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the end with like What It Is to Burn. Like you're just like
Yeah.
there's just high points all throughout it. I was bummed they were never really able to replicate what they did here. But I feel like this is such a staple, and like there were so many bands that would come in their shadows after them. And for me, musically, like I found a lot of bands because I liked Finch. So
I
gotta
think
take them
it's
here.
I think it's crazy that you took Finch after taking A Day to Remember, because Jeremy always cites Finch as a gigantic influence on A Day to Remember, being like one of the main drivers of them creating A Day to Remember. So I think that's a really cool connection there.
The straight line in there.
And then all roads lead back to Blink. Do you know that Finch was actually one of Mark and Tom's bands on their management, like little management imprint that they had for a while there?
Was that
So
Atticus? Or is it something
Atticus was their clothing line. I have
that was
no
it,
idea
okay.
what their management brand was, but yeah, I guess Mark and Tom actually managed Finch, which again is like you look at the weird through lines of the genre and the industry, and coming back to Blink there is funny, but I think it might have had something to do with the fact that Finch was another Drive Through Records band that
Yeah.
got upstreamed to MCA. And this album was like a true split between MCA and Drive Through Records. So there was that Blink was on MCA. So there was definitely that influence from Blink to, maybe nudge MCA in the direction of upstreaming Finch. And like you said, they never really replicated that success. So it's
No.
interesting that they were eventually upstream to that major label, but didn't make a whole lot of it other than for all of us, kids that love Screamo back in the day.
And they did get that song on Madden. They had Ink. That was off their album after this. That was in Madden.
Yes, yeah. Good call there.
And can we just talk about the intro to What It Is to Burn?
Oh,
With
it's
the
so
little
good.
violin,
So
like
good.
just build up. Oh,
That was
He
so
just
weird. What It Is
shatters
to
it,
Burn. What It Is to Burn was a bonus track on the CD when I got it, which I thought was so weird that the biggest single from the album was considered a bonus track. When
Like
it first
almost
came
didn't
out,
make
but-
it.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that strange?
The
Oh,
name, the
man.
namesake, the title track.
It's
That's
so
very
weird.
bizarre.
It's so weird. Yeah.
I caught them
Yeah, I
at
love that
Bamboozle
album.
one year. They played super early in the day, and like the crowd
Yeah.
wasn't huge for it, and they were on. Like I heard ups and downs of that his live vocals weren't always there. Maybe like threw his voice out or something. But
Mhm.
when I saw him back in like somewhere in the 04 to like 09 range, they delivered.
Their song "Stay With Me" from that album is like one of my all-time favorite songs. Like, I don't think I really understood relationships back when this song came out, but listening to it now, I feel a lot of the pain that he probably felt when he was writing that song about just trying to connect with someone and sitting in a car and not really being able to talk to them or understand maybe how they're feeling at that point in their lives. I don't know. I love that song. I used to cover it with my crappy cover band back in the day. So
Good crowd sing along song too.
What's the crazy heavy one on that just like starts screaming like right off the
Oh,
bat?
Project Mayhem.
Yeah. Ah, man.
great album.
Ender's a good one too. Well, I guess they wanted to end the album with Ender before adding What It Is to Burn's a bonus track.
oh man. All right. I'm gonna go take my third pick here, and it's an album that when I had I was putting together a list, and I was like, all right, let me put this list together, and trying to think of like how you guys would pick as well. And I had this number 4 on my list, so I'm surprised that no one's taken this. I'm gonna go with Ocean Avenue from Yellow Card,
Nice.
which oh my god, like I don't think I'll ever like another Yellow Card album other than Ocean Avenue. I'm sure they've got some other great songs out there, but I mean, man, I don't know about how you guys discovered Yellow Card, but I discovered them from their cover of Everywhere, that Michelle Branch song. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's got violin in it. Like, what's going on here? And then I discovered some more of their songs, and just the idea to bring an electric violin into a band and have it be a pop punk band, and these songs are just iconic. Like this is, how do you not love Ocean Avenue? And Way Away is on there. The Only One. I really like my
Breathing.
favorite song off the album.
Breathing.
Yeah, Breathing, right?
Oh
My
God,
favorite
that
song off the
guitar riff
album
was
is 23. I think this thing sold like, close to 2 million units too at the time. I just think it was like far and away their best album and really a staple of the scene. And it's just so good. It was another Neil Avron production. So again, I talked about him before, but he had worked with like New Found Glory, Fall Out Boy, Weezer, Frank's favorite band, Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Like this dude, he went on to work with like All Time Low, Walk the Moon. I don't know. I just this album is it when it comes to the pop punk genre, early 2000s. So
It was another video game one. Way Away was on SSX Tricky, and I remember like I guess more of a bridge, but when that song like mellows out like and has like the quiet part, and I'd just be like snowboarding in like the backcountry on my TV, and like that music would be playing, and it was just awesome. And then they had a live version of it where their violinist did I don't know if it was Way Away or Breathing actually, but he did a backflip off the speaker right before he came in with it, and like I was sold immediately.
yeah, that's really funny that you brought that up. I forgot he was one of the dudes doing backflips back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Like they have a really underrated drummer too, Yellow Card.
Oh yeah, his name's like Longague or Parsons or something like that, right? Yeah, he's pretty crazy.
So Way Away was also in Madden. 04, probably the best Madden, the Michael Vick Madden.
Yep.
So I just pulled it up. This was the year Feeling This was in it. It had Way Away. And I'm pretty sure it had a Hit the Lights song. It had Thrice
Give It
All That's
Up?
Left. It had Jet.
Give It Up Midtown?
Was that the year with Giving Up?
Are you
Maybe not.
reading it and you're saying I'm pretty sure?
Oh no, it froze. It froze. AFI the Leaving song. Like
Oh,
Jet, Are You Gonna Be My Girl? Like this Avenged Sevenfold was in it also. So like
Backcountry.
yeah, that was on SSX also.
Madden I think Madden had a Save as a Day song. Like they had like a ton of great bands. And now it's just garbage. Anyway, that's my Madden spiel.
The Madden indie label.
Yeah.